understand the mystery. First take a look at the history. The words we use will give us clues. So join us now in Church Chatter.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Church Chatter podcast, where we unpack a different church word or phrase each week. I'm Sam. I study Christian language and culture.
And I'm Dillon. I'm an ELCA Lutheran pastor.
And you'll notice that we now have video.
Oh boy.
We're trying. We're trying it. If we hate it, we'll go back to just audio. But if you're watching this on YouTube, there's
you get a
now
special treat today.
a video of us, and we'll see. Video's weird. We have just been talking about it because, like, I'm looking at Dillon now across from me and looking at the screen. You don't know where to look. It's just awkward.
Well, I feel like it's behind the scenes. You can see if you're from Pennsylvania, you know what scrapple is. You can see how the scrapple's made, and you can see how the sausage is made. I'm not a big fan, I have to tell you.
Well, a lot of times Dillon and I are in like sweatpants when we're doing this.
Real quick,
late at night.
Let's get it off the chest. I said to Samantha before we got on here, I despise this. I can't stand it. But you know what? You know what's good for the soul? To really work through it. So here we are.
Here we are. So behind the scenes, you'll see that we always light a candle when we start. So let's do that together. And you really get to see behind the scenes. You get to see, I'll be looking down a lot because I have a notebook. Dillon has his computer. We always have notes, right? So we can kind of stay on track. So we're going to jump into it. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
All right. So it's just going to be a conversation between Dillon and I, and it happens to be recorded. So hang in there with us for our first one. So this is episode 37, which is Cringey Church Words and Phrases, part 1.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we have a lot of them. Do we want to say the phrases in the beginning or just surprise them? We have 4 of them today. And
no, I think you should say
them up front.
Oh, you mean up front? Oh, no.
All right. So there are some Christian phrases that Dillon and I can't stand.
We find them icky.
We find them cringy. We find them very cringy. We don't like it. So we have made a list, and then that list was very long, so we made that list shorter, and then we made it shorter again, and then we split it into 2 episodes. So we're going to do 4 in each episode. This is part 1. Cringy Church Words and Phrases, part 1. So first, before we talk about these phrases and just give a little bit of context, we do want to say if you are somebody who has used these words and phrases, they are not all terrible in every context.
I would agree.
And they're not inherently bad, they're just misused, you know?
Well, they're misused, but we also don't like them.
We don't like them, yes. We will, as always, share our bias, but also give some context and some nuance there. A lot of these phrases, I don't want to tease it too much, I just want to jump into it, but they're loaded with power and guilt and judgment. Exclusion's a big one. Moral judgment, moral superiority, right? So we're going to talk about that. So, got my notebook. The first one is, love the sinner, hate the sin.
I'm going to be real normal on this. I need a drink of water. So
you're allowed to drink water, try it, yeah. Love the sinner, hate the sin. First of all, this is not in the Bible, right?
Nowhere. Not in the...
I don't even biblically, from my research, I don't even know that this is pulled out from anywhere specifically. It's just not in the Bible. Love the sinner, hate the sin. I don't... it's often misattributed to Augustine. Now, some people say Augustine. I'm an Augustine gal. How do you say it?
Augustine.
Augustine, yeah. Augustine...
The new pope is an Augustinian.
Augustinian, yeah. Now, Augustine did not say love the sinner, hate the sin. Augustine said, it's translated, but with love for mankind and hatred of sins. That is different.
That's very different.
Yes. And this phrase, you know, it'd be interesting if we had an episode where we didn't talk about fundamentalism or evangelicalism, but this phrase really became popular in the 20th century with evangelicalism, Catholicism even. We often hear it talked about in relationship to addiction and criminal activity, but especially with sexuality. Abortion, LGBT is a big one, right? I feel like I've only heard this in my own life when it comes to gay people. Well, just love the sinner, hate the sin. Is that typically
Yeah, I've heard it with
abortion too?
reproductive abortion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So why is this a problem? First, just at like a deep level, I mean, you could really take me to town on this, but it separates a person's actions and behavior from who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see a context where sometimes that's appropriate. Like, sometimes we're better than how we behave. Do you know what I mean? Like, our behavior doesn't have to be, do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's tricky. But I also think it's not for somebody else to do.
Yeah. Well, with the LGBT thing, people are arguing, is that something inherent to who that individual is, or some people think that it's a choice. It's like somebody wakes up one day and wants to be ridiculed for who they are.
Well, and you're touching on something. So when somebody says to a person in the queer community or about them, love the sinner, hate the sin, they're really exposing that they think their behavior is a choice.
Well, right.
Part of who they are.
Or
separating it.
Yeah. Or the same thing. So a woman is disclaimer here, or a parental warning. I'll pause. A woman who has been a victim of rape, or sexual abuse or incest, and in the early stages realizes that she is pregnant, and she decides that she needs to terminate the pregnancy. Well, that's a moment in time in which that woman is making a choice to do that, and yet you really have to argue. Now, some people could take me to the cleaners on this. Is that a choice?
When you're backed into a corner, yeah, and you're left with
when you have been also wronged. By the way, in the scriptures, if you want to be biblical about it, rape is a sin. Incest is a sin.
Yeah. And yet there are many characters, male characters, that are uplifted in the Bible who have raped.
Totally. So that's a major gray area. I'm not advocating for certain things, but
so we are Lutheran, and the sinner and saint theology, that Lutherans really lift that up. I would assume that that's elsewhere.
Yeah, but it's really a Lutheran thing.
Okay, so sinner and saint, talk about that.
Simul justus et peccator, which is the Latin for simultaneously a saint and a sinner. So this is very deeply rooted in the works of Martin Luther, who was a Roman Catholic priest in the Augustinian order. He was also an Augustinian. And he believed that a person is 100% a sinner and 100% a saint, simultaneously, simul justus, which is the Latin.
Trinity, where like Jesus is not half human, half divine.
It's giving the hypostatic union between Christ. Christ is 100% divine and 100% human.
Jesus the Christ.
Yeah, Jesus the Christ. And he's not 50 and 50. He's 100% and 100%, which means 200%, which is off the charts.
Yes.
We too.
Can I ground that for a minute? Like, you think about
do you have to? Yeah.
You think about your own self, right? Like, I'm not 25% a mother,
right,
and 15% a wife, and 40% a writer. I'm all of those things all the time, 100%. Identity is not a pie to divvy up, right? So it's kind of like that. So we're sinner and saint simultaneously. And I think that's important for love the sinner, hate the sin. I just feel like that's an important part of that conversation.
Yeah, I always think of when we have to talk about this, which sometimes is like, oh, do we really have to do that? But I think every time I do a funeral at the end of the funeral, there is a benediction prayer, which benediction means towards the end, a blessing at the end. And it always says...
We should do an episode on benediction.
Yeah, we
Write
should.
that down.
The prayer goes like this. This is at least in the Lutheran worship book. It goes like this. A lamb of your own flock and a sinner of your own redeeming. And so even at the end, we're all sinners. We have all been redeemed by Jesus Christ. That's the core of Christianity. So we're a sheep or a lamb of the flock, and we're a sinner of God's own redeeming. And so we're simultaneously this lamb or this sheep that is a part of God's flock fully. Mm-hmm. And we're also a sinner that has fully been redeemed. Mm-hmm. So we hold those two things together.
Good and bad.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And it's not a pie split in half, because there's not a clear line between good and evil or good and bad. Like, it's all... I've been doing this thing because I've been struggling with perfectionism. So in my trusty notebook, I've been drawing a picture, an imperfect picture. Actually, I can just show it to you. I posted it on Instagram the other day. But I drew this picture. Can you see it? And it says, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow.
Mm-hmm,
it's like sinner and saint, right? Where it's like, yeah, good and bad. Like, you can't have the sunlight without a shadow, without it casting a shadow. Like, it just doesn't exist. Wherever there's beauty, there's also ugliness there as well, and vice versa. Wherever something is ugly, there's also beauty somewhere if you know how to look for it.
Well, there's an interesting thing. During the Reformation, during the Protestant Reformation, there were some reformers that said there should be absolutely no veneration, or veneration means lifting up or honoring of any of the saints. Because we don't want that, right? Mm-hmm. And Martin Luther, as a Lutheran pastor, we look to what was Martin Luther thinking at that time during the Protestant Reformation. And what Luther said was, no, we absolutely look to the saints. Now, we don't, for Lutherans at least, we don't pray to the saints. Mm-hmm. So they're not intercessors in that we pray to them. We only pray to God. But we look to the saints because they are just like us. They can indeed be exemplary, and they can offer virtue and good works that we can follow and mimic. And they can also offer us the faith that we have and the witness that we have in their own life. And we can also see that this is literally Luther's words, that they are jackasses just like the rest of us. Yeah. And so Luther loved the word jackass, by the way. He wrote it quite often.
Jesus of Nazareth, when he said privy, like, he talked about, it's, help me out, you're good at this. It's not what comes in your body that is bad, but what comes out.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew's gospel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I gotta get this right. It's Matthew's gospel, I believe, and it's what is in the body
that comes out.
That comes out, not what goes.
People were being obsessed with. People were obsessed with. I shouldn't say obsessed. That's derogatory. But some people were overly concerned about putting food that they shouldn't be eating in their body.
like gluttony,
right. And Jesus was saying it's not what comes in, because that's going to end up in the privy.
Yeah.
That word privy, a lot of linguists and translators have said the shitter, the shithole, right? Like that, it was a vulgar word. Brood of vipers, when John the Baptist and Jesus said brood of, I think they both said brood of vipers, that is it's a swear word. It's profanity. It's like, so just our notion again of like what is sacred and what is profane, what is good and what is bad.
One of the first things I learned in seminary was when I took my homiletics class, which is teaching a pastor how to preach. I can remember my homiletics professor, she said, don't you ever call your congregation a brood of vipers.
Right.
Even though they may be, don't call them that.
It doesn't cut our ear in the same
just
way,
not,
but that was abrupt.
But John the Baptist had something to say. Mm-hmm. They were probably being just that, a brood of vipers, and he let them have it.
And Jesus said it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, love the sin or hate the sin. The big ick for me, the reason I find this cringy, is the moral superiority.
Oh.
And again, it often has to do with sexuality and criminal behavior and addiction whenever people say these things. And yet, if they see somebody who is rich beyond belief,
I was just going to say that.
They would not say that.
Mm-mm.
They would not say love the sinner, hate the sin.
They would not call out their local hedge fund representative.
Right. So the moral superiority also, I'm
or the
speak
bank,
in absolutes.
or the bank, or the let's just talk about this one real quick. Or they would not say love the sinner but hate the sin to their local bank representative who is charging people interest.
Right, which
Jesus talks a lot about.
Is unbiblical. The Bible flat out says in the Old Testament, do not charge interest.
Now we can parcel out the importance of interest and how we can be good stewards of interest and not be greedy people. But if we want to say sin and we want to, look at that black and white, which I'm not arguing that we should, but you better call out your local bank manager.
Yeah.
And your investment portfolio representative.
Well, so what I'm going to say is...
Oh, and now we're on camera.
I have never, ever, ever heard people who say, just love the sinner, hate the sin. I've never heard them direct that to themselves.
No.
It's always somebody else.
Right.
So if you're somebody who says that, be really intentional about, Jesus talks about the plank in our own eye, right? Are you turning that towards yourself? Because again, Lutheran theology, which is who we are, but there's goodness and badness in all of us, and it's all mixed in there.
Oh, really?
It's
and that's
inseparable.
The beauty.
Yeah. So maybe try turning that towards yourself a little bit instead of pointing fingers and you deciding which sins. And Dillon and I were talking about this earlier. People's love of ranking sin is so crazy to me. Like we've decided these things are the sins that we should call out, but these things are not. It's just crazy.
Now, someone would say, yeah, well, but Jesus does do that. And so the 7 deadly sins cannot be found in the Bible. That is that's something called church theology. So the church over time, including the Lutheran Church, we uphold the 7 deadly sins, also the 7 virtues. We kind of forget about those, but
of course.
But the 7 deadly sins, Jesus doesn't lift those up. That we have gone through the scriptures and looked at these 7 things, the 7 virtues, the 7 sins, are what Jesus talk about most. But that doesn't mean they're worse. Does that make sense? So there's no ranking of sins. Sin is real, and sin is sin. And I know that some people might like. So they're saying basically, are you telling me that if somebody murders somebody, that it's the same as if someone stole cheese curls at the the local Boyers? That's our local grocery store here. I would say, yeah. Theft and murder are the same thing. They break something. But what do we? But what they break a connection between you and God. They break a connection between you and the community. Sin is separation from God and community. That's all sin is. And at the same time, murder and theft are. Do you ever notice that in the 10 Commandments that they're both listed, and they don't say one's worse than the other.
Yeah.
They just say don't do them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, this moral superiority of love the sinner, hate the sin. In sociolinguistics, is called politeness strategy or polite theory or politeness theory. This idea, it's so simple actually. We've all. Those backhanded compliments, right? It's a linguistic thing. It's something we do with our language, right? Where it's like, I can't even think. I'm trying to think of a backhanded compliment. I can't think of anything now. But whenever you say, oh, love the sinner, hate the sin, what you are doing, I'm saying you, like the collective you, what somebody is doing when they say that is they're placing themselves above that person and they're acting like they're being polite and operating from a place of kindness and caring. But really they're judging and they're condemning and they're being unkind is what they're doing.
And they're shaming.
Yes. And I think just to wrap up, love the sinner, hate the sin, because there's really not much there except that like it's misattributed to Saint Augustine, 20th century, with especially Catholicism and evangelicalism. But it sounds like grace, but it's self-righteousness. And I want to talk about unconditional love, right?
Okay.
So Dillon and I are millennials, and it's kind of in the zeitgeist for millennials, therapy, and Dillon and I both have been in therapy before. But there's this really basic thing that if you go to therapy, you most likely learn it pretty quickly. If there is a part of you and you are struggling with it, like if you have anger and you're struggling with it, if you like try to fight the anger, right? If you're like fighting the anger, you're combating it, you're just making it more angry and making it bigger. Same with sadness, same with anxiety. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Same with if you've ever known an addict, and if you've tried telling them like, just stop doing it, it actually makes it worse for that person.
Right.
Because what happens is whenever we're like, stop it, don't be angry, don't be anxious, whether it's your internal voices or somebody else that loves you saying it, what happens is it's actually attaching shame to it now. And shame just makes any emotion bigger. Shame is just like the emotion that like hops on the back of another emotion is how I picture it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you are somebody, and this is hard for me to say, but of course, yeah, there is evil, there is sin. Some people's behavior it's not okay. And we love them anyway. But saying, I love you, I'm going to love the sinner but hate the sin, I believe wholeheartedly as a wife, as a mother, as a friend, if you're going to love somebody, it's either unconditional or it's not real. You cannot have conditions on it. You have to say, I'm here for you, and embrace all of them, because that's the only thing that softens the behavior. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's
I'm wondering
there's
though.
no amount of pointing fingers that's actually going to make it go away. Now, there's something to be said for boundaries. That's a different conversation. Boundaries, accountability, but saying, I hate your sin, right? Like, love the sinner, but I hate the sin. It doesn't help anything. It's not doing anything. It's causing shame, and shame is not an emotion of action. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I'm
We
wondering.
need a therapist on this episode because
Sure.
they could for sure talk
I wonder.
about
I wonder what a person might be thinking though if they say, "Are you saying I'm on the murder kick here?" Let me change it up. Are you saying that if you cheat on your spouse, let's use that one, adultery. If you cheat on your spouse, you're to say to them, "It's okay."
Oh no, that's not.
No, I'm thinking someone might be
ground it.
thinking of this and thinking, what in the world are you saying?
And this is where we really have to.
There's
decide.
a lot of parceling out. You know when you have like a blanket, and there's a thread that's kind of like coming out.
Yeah.
You kind of have to like, in order to get it back in, you got to pull it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then you have to trim away, pruning. Jesus, you might think that it's weird, but I mean, Jesus taught, that's one of his parables, pruning the fig tree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you cut the person off, or you say, well, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. This is where we have to define love well.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever done that.
No.
It's hard to define that word. But boundaries is different than saying, boundaries is required for healthy love. If you have a child who's an addict who keeps stealing from you, you say, I love you.
Yeah.
I want you to get better, and I want you to get help, and I love you.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot live here anymore.
Sure.
Or you tell your 2-year-old, which is what we're doing right now, if you hit me one more time, you are going to go sit in timeout until your body calms down.
That was about 5 million times today. Yeah.
Or if it's a spouse, I am very hurt that you are cheating, and we're going to go to counseling and try to get over this. And if you do it one more time, I am done, and this marriage is over. But you can still love them. It's like certain behavior. It feels like I'm actually supporting love the sinner, hate the sin.
No, you're not.
I'm not, because you don't hate the sin. You have compassion nobody wants to be cheated on, and
Well-
this is my highest self-talking because I'm not being cheated on.
Right.
But if I was cheated on, which I mean, in the past I have been with other people who hasn't been, if you really love the person, if it's like unconditional love, then there is a part of you that has compassion for that part of them that felt whatever they felt that they had to cheat.
Right.
Right?
You're right. Yes.
There's a certain acceptance of like, I get it.
So you and I both despise the phrase "love the sinner, hate the sin."
Can't stand it.
It's nasty. It's
actually
disgusting.
one of the phrases I don't think anyone should ever say.
I don't approve of that phrase. I don't like it. I don't use it. I want other people to use it. Here's the thing. Some people try to, parcel it out and look at the thing and be a person of unconditional love and yet say, oh, I wish you wouldn't have stolen. I wish you wouldn't have done that. Okay? So that's one thing. But here's the thing. Recently, and when I mean recently, I'm talking about in the past, 40, 50 years, last 100 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
This phrase in particular has been used against people who are on the margins.
Yes.
That's the issue.
Yes.
People aren't saying it to people who stole cheese curls at Boyer's, and they're not saying it to people who are sitting in jail for a multitude of different things. They're saying it particularly about...
Well, I'll push back on that one because a majority of the people who are in prison are on the margins, which led to their criminal activity because poverty is criminalized.
Yes,
right?
I see that. I see where you're going with that. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, they're on the margins.
And now they're in prison, which
but now I agree
further.
with you totally on that. But the thing is, I still don't hear many people saying that about people who are incarcerated. Incarcerated.
Yeah.
I hear
LGBT
people
and abortion.
LGBT people and abortion.
Mm-hmm.
One, a whole community,
Mm-hmm.
another, also kind of a whole community with reproductive care, and yet much more individual.
Yeah.
And it is to shame them.
Yes.
And that is, so the tenor in which it is done.
So there's a Bible scholar on social media named Dan McClellan who's really excellent. And he says this all the time, and it's so beautiful. When all else is equal, so he tries really hard to be neutral, not to give bias, and just say what the scholarly consensus is for different things related to the Bible. And he will say, when all else is equal, I give the benefit of the doubt to those with less power.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what we're saying here is like, if you are saying love the sinner, hate the sin to a woman who just had to have reproductive care,
you should check yourself at the door.
Right. If you're saying that to somebody who's in the queer community,
you should check yourself.
That's a person who's already struggling because of the way our society does not accept them.
Yeah.
All right, so the main point with this one is it sounds like grace. Love the sinner, hate the sin. It sounds like grace, but it's just self-righteousness.
Well, it's judgment covered with icing.
Yes. Yeah.
It's gross.
All right, next.
All right, so the next phrase is this one, and I love the word loathe, by the way. I loathe it. So I loathe this phrase, meaning that I really dislike it. And it is, God helps those who help themselves. A contemporary American capitalistic phrasing would be, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the kind of more secular phrasing of it. And then people will mix God in with it.
It's prosperity gospel.
Oh, it's so gross to me. God helps those who help themselves. Now, let me go out on
I can see a context where this is sometimes okay. I would never say love the sinner, hate the sin. God helps those who helps themselves. I will say, I would never use it. You think it should never be used?
I think it should never be talked about.
Convince me.
I could maybe have some elasticity in some situations, but that's almost close to none.
Well, can I expose our bias really quick? Dillon and I are both oldest siblings. We have younger siblings. And a common trait is we're very action oriented, and it does tend to drive us crazy whenever there are people in our lives who are just like, oh, I just wish this, I just want that. And that's where I can kind of see like just something that Dylan and I often say to people, and it's just true, is just do it. Just do it.
That's
Just
different though,
do it.
because that I don't want to say has nothing to do, but that is not connecting God to it.
I can see how somebody
Uh,
who is used to using God language could easily be like, God helps those who help themselves.
Right. Well, God helps those who help themselves is not a biblical principle.
Mm-hmm.
It is not found anywhere in the Old or New Testament. It is not found anywhere on the lips or the words of Jesus. And so therefore, if you're a good follower of Jesus, here's my thing, my finger wagging, you shouldn't be saying it. God helps those who helps themselves is not biblical, it's not Christian, and it's nasty. Now, let me talk about why it has kind of how this phrase has evolved, and why something that was once fairly secular has kind of fell into the religious realm of things. Okay, so this phrase "God helps those who helps themselves" actually predates Christianity. Okay, and the core of it comes from ancient Greece and ancient Greek philosophy. Okay, you can find a phrasing like story in Aesop's Fables, which was around the 6th century. Okay, and if you know the story of Hercules and the Wagoner, I'm really going out on a limb here, but Hercules and the Wagoner. So there's a man, and he is carrying a cart, and he gets stuck, right? He gets stuck in the mud, and instead of helping himself, he cries out and he prays to Hercules, and he says, Hercules, Hercules, my God, appear and tell me what I should do. And Hercules comes and says, put the wheel on your shoulder. Put the wheel on your shoulder of the wagon and push. And when you push, God helps those who help themselves. So it's connecting Hercules, who's a demigod in Greek culture, in Greek religion.
That's really interesting.
And so the Wagoner reaches out to Hercules, and he says, Hercules, help me. Like you or I would reach out to God and say, God, give me strength. God, help me. Well, here's the kicker for it. God doesn't come and intervene and help on God's own sovereignty and power. Hercules, as the demigod, says to the Wagoner, oh yeah, you need to put your shoulder up against that wheel and you need to start pushing, and then, maybe only then, something will happen to you. So God helps those who help themselves. Hercules is basically saying, do it yourself. Do it yourself. Okay? Now,
there's some truth in that.
Sure, that's truth, but there's also something about that which is really icky, and we're going to move into this. Okay? In the 1700s, Benjamin Franklin writes a little thing to Poor Richard's Almanac in I said the 1700s. It was 1680s. It was the 1680s. And he writes in it, when he's talking about people helping themselves and what they need to do in terms of being better business managers. Mm-hmm. Now let me repeat that. Business managers. He says in the Poor Richard's Almanac in the 1680s, Benjamin Franklin says, verbatim, God helps those who help themselves. Mm-hmm. So, first, you have this Hercules and the Wagoner type thing, and you have this Hercules, the demigod, is saying, you got to do it on your own, you got to do it on yourself, and then maybe I'll help you, right? You got to do a little bit that. Then Benjamin Franklin in the Almanac, Poor Man's Almanac in the 1680s, once again, is saying, God helps those who help themselves. Basically, pull up your bootstraps, get yourself out there, and get moving, and then, and only then, God will help you. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, if you're a good This is not an anti-Catholic statement, by the way. Let me make that very clear. This is not an anti-Catholic statement. I love the Roman Catholic Church and have great respect for it. But I'm a Protestant pastor, in particularly a Protestant Lutheran pastor. Lutherans are Protestants. Our main ethic in Protestant theology is grace and grace alone. That it is by the grace of God that brings us to faith, and therefore it is only because of God that we are where we are. And God guides us every single way. There's nothing we can do because we are simul justus et peccator. We are simultaneously saint and sinner at the same time. And because we are saint, we can do good things, but because we are sinner, we can never fully reach out to God. That's why God's grace comes to us in the person of Jesus. If you are a good Protestant, this phrase, God helps those who helps themselves, there's no place in Protestant theology for it. It doesn't make any sense. I can understand how you would say, hey, you're going to need to, get out and get a job. Like maybe you should work at Walmart, and come on, you can do it. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. But connecting it to God's providence and God's grace and God's love and God's forgiveness, well, only if you work at Walmart and get your rear end out there will God help you. That is not a Protestant ethic.
It's not, but there is the Protestant.
Oh, here you go.
There is the Protestant work ethic that comes out of Calvinism. That's a real thing.
Okay.
Yes, formal Protestant, I'll call it doctrine, really highlights grace, and I'm with you on it. And
yes,
yet you can't deny, we've already talked about this so many times, but Protestantism coming alongside Enlightenment is what laid the groundwork for capitalism and work, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And just all of it.
Yes, but God, yes, you're correct. But God helps those who help themselves.
I can see how Protestants would say that. I don't agree.
But we shouldn't.
No, I agree.
Here's the thing. I am not opposed to someone in a gentle, loving way saying, how can I help you? Mm-hmm. How can I help you in your struggles to be uplifted to do better?
Yes.
That is one thing. But when you are connecting, God helps those who help themselves. So basically saying, until you get your rear end in gear, God's going to do nothing for you. That is plain and factually wrong. Mm-hmm. So that's why I dislike it. I dislike the phrase. Because, and another thing, this is just my last comment on this. Does this apply to people with intellectual disabilities? Mm-hmm. Does this apply for people who are aging? Mm-hmm. Does this apply for people who are have other abilities, who are in poverty, who are unhoused, mm-hmm. people who are terminally ill? Are you going to tell them to pull up their bootstraps?
Yeah. So,
or that God will only help them if they can actually take the spoon and eat their own soup? I mean, it gets real.
Yeah.
It
so
gets
Nadia
real weird.
Boltz-Weber,
quick.
who, as you know, is a Lutheran pastor, and she started the church called House for All Sinners and Saints.
Mm-hmm. In Denver, right?
I think Denver, Colorado. I believe she's still doing it, but she does prison ministry at a women's prison.
She's not at House of All Sinners and Saints any longer. No,
she hasn't been there in a long time, yeah. But I'm pretty sure she's doing prison ministry right now, and she has been for quite a few years. And she had this really interesting thing. I follow her on her Substack, so her newsletter I get in my inbox, and she said that if it can't be said to the lowest among us, meaning the imprisoned, people living in poverty, right? They're just the marginalized. If it can't be said to them, then don't ever say it. Right. Just So an example that she gave is manifestation. Right. You can't go in to somebody who's lived in extreme poverty and they're unhoused, and tell them if you just envision it, it'll happen. Please Please get out of here with that kind of
Mhm.
philosophy. You can't go into a women's prison. And she said 100% of these women have faced extreme, intense trauma in their
Yeah.
childhoods.
Mhm.
And now they're in prison. By the way, that's true for all people in prison.
Yeah.
Like men and women,
Yeah.
everything in between and beyond, that is true of all people. You don't just become addicted because you don't have intense pain. You don't go and steal because you're not rebelling against something that's harmed you. You don't
Right.
kill somebody just because.
Right.
I mean, there's like you could talk about like sociopaths, but that's like a huge outlier. So
Right.
if you can't say it to the lowest among us, then you shouldn't be saying it at all. And God helps those who helps themselves is one of them. Where it's like if you can't say that to somebody who doesn't have control over their arms and legs, okay, then maybe we shouldn't be spewing that everywhere.
But then some people might say, well, no, I'm talking about able-bodied people. Okay. Well, there are other ways to go about that by reaching out to them and saying, what are your skills?
Yes.
How can we?
But let's even just debunk that. Let's take it further. This is what I have a note right here. I have the poor work so hard, and I have so underlined.
Yeah.
Because there's also this myth, and I don't want to play into it right now as we're talking. There's this myth that like if you're poor, you're not working hard. Please.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Please. When I
That's
used to volunteer
ridiculous.
at the Literacy Council, I met people who were well below the poverty line and barely making ends meet. Not even barely making ends meet. They weren't making ends meet.
Yeah.
They weren't. They were behind. Their electricity was shut off. Their water was shut off. They were just behind on everything. They were about to be evicted. Some of them were evicted. Just this terrible stuff. And they were some of the hardest workers I knew. They couldn't afford a car. They had 2.5 jobs. They were walking 3 miles one way to the Literacy Council so they could get their GED because they couldn't graduate high school by no fault of their own. There was too much going on in their home growing up, right? They work so hard. So this whole like, God helps those who help themselves. There are a lot of people in this world who are doing a lot of things to help themselves, and it's not helping. It's not.
Well, right,
They
and
can't
people
get their head above water because of bad systems.
And the media has really picked up on this because this is also a big problem with immigrants and refugees. You hear everybody likes to give all the negative stories on the news media about immigrants and refugees, and sometimes things happen, and sometimes bad things happen, and we have to realize that, and we have to recognize it, and we have to move forward. And yet at the same time, many immigrants and refugees are looking for a place to belong for themselves and their family, and they are hardworking, and part of that work happens on the journey to come to a new place, to escape something
that is them trying
to help themselves. And so that's the first step.
Good.
Okay,
next one.
You're up.
All right, the next one is really simple. I cannot stand when people call anything biblical. It's a biblical marriage. It's a biblical womanhood, biblical manhood, biblical economy, or biblical family. I'm a Bible-believing Christian.
What does that even mean?
Biblical is not an adjective. It just shouldn't be. Just stop it. Just stop it. First of all, we could really do like many episodes on this, and we've kind of touched on it. The Bible does not come out of one culture. It does not come out of one culture. It does not have one voice. It cannot be looked at as if like every woman who is talked about in here is the example of biblical womanhood. No, because some of the women who are in the Bible are thousands of years apart and in different parts of the world. You can't, with different structures.
This is news to me.
So the Bible is not one voice or one culture. If you say, I always have Sarah Palin, because I saw her one time say, I'm a Bible-believing Christian. Oh. Like that's what the track I have in my head.
Okay, can I make a comment? Sarah Palin, God bless her. Okay, but when she was running with John McCain in 2008, and she did a debate, okay, and she did a debate, and it was with President Biden. Yeah, it was with President Biden.
Well,
and
at the time, he was
she
VP candidate.
Yeah, right. And she went off the rails. I mean, totally off the rails. It was crazy, making all
Is
kinds
this related to the word biblical?
Yes, all kinds of things. And she went on and she was talking about, they said, well, what kind of magazines do you read for like current events? And she named like Christianity Today or something like that. And but that's the only one that she read. And I remember the then senator from Rhode Island, the Republican, making a note of that, Republican senator from Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee, got on television, a person of her own political party, although much more moderate or liberal. And they said, Senator, what do you think about the vice presidential candidate, Sarah Palin, because of this last debate? And he said, I think she's a cocky wacko. And every time I think of Sarah Palin, I think of the Republican senator from Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee, saying, she's a cocky wacko.
That's funny. That's really funny. But now it's like normalized.
Oh, it's totally normalized.
So there's this book. Now this can be applied. Well, first let me say, the reason I find it icky, the reason it's cringy when somebody says anything's biblical, right? Especially like biblical womanhood is the big one right now I see everywhere. But biblical marriage, all of those. Are there other ones I'm missing? I've heard biblical economy.
Biblical marriage
biblical nation
is a big one. Yeah.
Well, so whenever somebody puts that ahead of it, like biblical, we have said this so many times, but I'm going to say it again. There has never been one interpretation of the Bible. Actually, there's not even an agreed upon Bible. You pick up any Bible and they're all different translations with different books in it. Some contain different books that other ones don't, and vice versa, right?
But you'll drive by churches. I mean, we just drove by. Where we? It was today or yesterday. I won't mention which one it was because I know exactly which one it was. But we drove by it, and it says right on.
We don't want to be guilty
of
slander.
No, I would never do that. But we drove by it, and it says right on their sign. It says we are a Bible-believing church.
It's become a political
What
term.
does that even mean?
Right.
Well, I'll tell you what it means to them.
It means that they think they treat the Bible with inerrancy.
Correct.
They think that you can just read it at face value and
Correct.
you don't have to understand anything about the translations or the culture or the
Correct.
history or the politics or anything that was happening during the time.
But what the biggest thing they'll say is that they don't have church synods, or they don't have church assemblies coming together to create doctrinal things to interpret the scriptures. To which I would say to them, do you believe in the Trinity? Mm-hmm. Do you believe in the hypostatic union of Christ Jesus, that he's 100% human and 100% divine? And you know what they'd probably say? Oh, yes, of course. Of course we believe in the Trinity. Of course we believe in that Jesus is fully human. To which I would say, well, that's not in the Bible.
Do you believe that baptism is a religious rite? Because it was not in the time of the Bible.
I mean, all these. So once somebody says, well, if it's not in the Bible, then I don't believe it. Well, that's just.
You're making the Bible. You're making the Bible.
It's idolatry.
Yes, you're making the Bible into an idol, but you're also making it into you're shape shifting it instead of treating it for what it is, which is a complicated collection of books.
A historical.
It's not the history
but
of Christians and Jews. It is their story.
Yes, it's a historical document, and it's about people sharing how God was working in their life.
Yeah, through storytelling.
Sometimes
factual, always true.
Absolutely.
So, anyway.
And all I have to say is a good church assembly, or a good synod, or a good council, ecumenical council matters.
Yes.
A book of doctrines, Samantha and I might disagree with this. A good book of doctrines or theology matters.
No, I
knew she was gonna go back.
I used to really, really struggle, and it was kind of divine intervention, I think. So I like biblical language because I can kind of, Dillon and I were just talking about this, you can kind of pin it down and like explore it. Theology feels so current and real time to me that like sometimes it's hard to like, it's like on the move, you know, and it's like alive. And like the Bible, not that the Bible not alive, you know what I mean, but it's just kind of like it's there. You can explore what it's been. But so the book that I have coming out with Pilgrim Press next year, little plug, originally, so it's about Christian language and how it's intertwined with empire and how a lot of Christian language was formerly political language. And at first I just had all these chapters, but now we completely restructured it and with my editor, and the first half of the book is about biblical language and the second half of the book is church language. And there, it's a little blurry, but we did like separate them the best we could. And it helped, and I have like a long chapter before all of the words to kind of set it up. But am I explaining that in a way that makes sense?
Absolutely.
So the list of church words and me going through and editing and reformatting and everything really helped me see that, like, wow, there's a lot about Christianity that is not, a big one obviously is Trinity.
Sure.
The word Trinity is not.
And I totally uphold the Trinity. I'm not arguing
Bible.
that. I'm just saying it's not cohesive. It's not fully cohesive in the Bible.
Yeah.
It is taking different types of things over a span of time of what was said and how people were experiencing God.
Yeah.
And it had been codified, meaning put in, taking all these moving puzzle pieces and put in and formulated into one kind of slightly cohesive teaching.
Yes.
That's called theology.
Yeah. Even the word Bible's not in the Bible.
No.
It's on the cover.
No.
So we named it that 'cause it means
And most
collection
of the
books.
time it's talking about, I'm not saying don't read the Bible, that's not what I'm saying. But for most of the time that people's experience of the biblical stories in both the Old and the New Testament were hearing them.
Yes.
They were being read in the synagogue. They were being read in community, eventually read aloud, like we do, most people do, on a Sunday, read at church, and then that's the whole thing about a sermon, too. A sermon is to interpret and talk about what does the story and the text mean.
So
And a part of just real quick, a part of that is saying, what does your community, what does your church believe? So I have the Bible, the Old and New Testament, but then I'm a Lutheran pastor, so I also have the Book of Confessions.
Right.
And the Book of Confessions, including the creeds and other things, help me interpret what it is.
Well, that's also the point of a sermon.
But that church that we passed today that says that they are a Bible-believing church most likely would say they don't need a Book of Confessions. They just read right from the book.
Yes.
To which I would say you don't get the Trinity.
Yes, and a lot of other things.
And you don't get.
So I'm gonna lose it. Hold on. Bible believing. Wait, what were we just talking about? Oh, I lost it. It's all right. So
sorry.
I lost it, but I do have a quick story. So I'm gonna be really vague. But there's a person that Dillon and I used to know. She was very Christian, not the kind of Christian that Dillon and I are. And if you're listening to this, we all know there's lots of different kinds of Christians.
But I do believe she follows Jesus.
Yeah, I would never say she's not a Christian.
No,
I would never.
No,
like
but
some people are like they're not Christian. I'm not going to play.
Well,
that
I'm
game,
just saying. I'm just saying it out loud for me because I struggled to think that she was, and what I'm trying to say is I do think that she was.
Well,
I just
Dillon
see
and I
things
had some conversations
very
with her
differently
over a few months, and yes, we saw things very differently than her, which is fine. That tends to happen anytime that we talk about religion. It's fine.
It's even healthy.
She said to us that we had a low view of Scripture, and she had a high view of Scripture. Now, it took me some time to realize that what she meant in our language was she views the Bible as inerrant and flawless and without mistake and without contradiction within it. And I thought that was interesting that she thinks we have a low view of Scripture, when what I believe is, whenever you take the Bible seriously, you have to enter into the fact that the Bible says some crazy shit.
Yeah.
And it paradoxes, it's just full of paradoxes. It contradicts itself all the time. It's just really messy. So you gotta enter into it.
Yeah.
I remember what I was going to say now.
Oh.
So at our church, whenever I hear somebody, like before or after church, being like, yeah, I'm going to try to like read the Bible. I haven't read it the whole way through, or I want to read this book of the Bible, but I'm like a little worried because I try to read it and I don't really get it. I'm like a prairie dog where I'm like, and I like scurry over, and I have no problem saying it. And people who go to our church who are listening to this have probably heard me say it, where I'm like, no. The Bible should not just be like, crack it open and start reading. You gotta commit. Are you committed? Go read some other books, and I'll like give them a list of books. Like, read these books alongside it, so you can see like what time. If you just, I did that. Do you remember? Like 6 or 7 years ago, I read it, and I remember every night in bed looking at Dillon and being like, "What is this? Is crazy. Like, this changes people's lives. I don't even get it."
I'm gonna make a very.
And then I started reading other books about it, and then rereading it. I'm like, "Oh, I got it. I get it."
We might get comments from my comment that I'm gonna say. We might get.
Are you sure you want to say it?
Yes, I'm sure I want to say it. I think that for many people, I'm not going to say most and I'm not going to say all, but I think for many people, if they were to just open up the Bible, which many people do, and they were to open up to a random book of the Bible, and they were to read it, number one, they'd be very confused about what's going on. And number two, I think it's a great way to make an atheist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What I think is very healthy is to indeed get a Bible, buy a Bible, open it up.
Join a church.
Join a church with a real pastor.
Emphasis on the real.
Emphasis on the real.
Who has been trained in
with
Hebrew
a real pastor, and go and join a book study, a Bible study. Go and hear the readings read on a Sunday, and then hear a sermon and take communion, and be involved, and wrestle with the text, and also fall in love with it. It's very beautiful in many ways. But if you've never read it before, and you're sitting on your chair or you're laying in bed and you turn your lamp on and you open to something like Chronicles or Numbers, or you open up to the book of Revelation or to some scary parts of Jude, and you don't know the context or the history or what's going on, and you're not reading it in community where there's some very seasoned people who have been reading it forever and wrestling with it, some very young people coming together and doing that, I'm going to say it again.
It can get wacky.
I think not only can it get wacky because you don't know the culture and the time and the language and the history behind it. And if you read it and you say, God wiped out all the Canaanites and destroyed them, and you're reading a genocide story, you might turn around because you don't know any of the history or the background around that, or why this may be or why it might not be.
Not that there's a justification for genocide.
Oh, no, I'm not making any justification. What I'm saying is, but if you read that and you're reading it as, this is what the Bible says, this is it, that could make somebody, I'm going to use good old evangelical language, that could make somebody an unbeliever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That could make somebody a good capital H, a good capital A atheist.
Yeah.
So
the point is, people who say I'm a Bible believing Christian, or even like I believe in the Bible, that statement doesn't hold up to logic.
You should believe it. No,
it doesn't hold up. I have a lot more with this one if you want to.
Yeah, just real quick, I just want to say one thing. If you're a Christian, a follower of Jesus, and you attend a Christian church, Jesus never once tells you to believe in the Bible. And that's it. Jesus specifically, in a multitude of different ways, in many different books in the New Testament, says three things. Love God, your neighbor, and yourself. Those are the three things. And those are, in all the commandments, love one another. Love God. That means God who created all things. Love your neighbor who God has come in the person of Jesus to show us, meaning your neighbor. And love yourself because God made you.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness, Lord have mercy.
Okay, so biblical womanhood is one way people use this word biblical, right? And so Rachel Held Evans, she was an evangelical. She did pass away quite a few years ago now.
Maybe 10.
And she wrote this book.
But she did not remain an evangelical. Maybe you should.
At the time that she wrote this, she was an evangelical.
Okay.
She talks about herself as an evangelical, but she did leave then.
And she became an Episcopalian.
Yes, and speaking of Nadia Bolz-Weber, they were friends. Nadia Bolz-Weber is the one who did her funeral. But anyway, she wrote this book. It's called A Year of Biblical Womanhood, How a Liberated Woman Found Herself Sitting on Her Roof, Covering Her Head, and Calling Her Husband Master. And it's right here. It's very good if you're interested. But she talks about this concept of biblical womanhood. And then for a whole year, she tries to live like this biblical woman to make the point that, like, this is absurd. What are we saying, right? So I'm going to read you just a quick part of this. She says, now we evangelicals have a nasty habit of throwing the word biblical around like it's Martin Luther's middle name.
Oh, God.
We especially like to stick it in front of other loaded words like economics, sexuality, politics, and marriage to create the impression that God has definitive opinions about such things, opinions that just so happen to correspond with our own. Despite insistent claims that we didn't pick and choose what parts of the Bible we take seriously, using the word biblical prescriptively like this almost always involves selectivity. After all, technically speaking, it is biblical for a woman to be sold by her father. That's in Exodus 21, verse 7. Biblical for her to be forced to marry her rapist. That's in Deuteronomy 22. It is biblical for a woman to remain silent in church. That's in 1 Corinthians. It is biblical for her to cover her head. That's in 1 Corinthians. And biblical for her to be one of multiple wives. That's in Exodus. So if we're going to hold up, like, again, we could talk about biblical manhood, we could talk about biblical anything, but let's just hone in on one, biblical womanhood. If we're going to say biblical womanhood is a thing, you can't just pick and choose and be like, oh, biblical womanhood is somebody who has 3 to 4 children and she stays at home and she doesn't work outside the home and make a paycheck and her husband provides for her. And
also, you can also, if
there's so much more that the Bible says about womanhood.
Now, some people might be saying, though, oh, well, all of those are Hebrew passages. All those are Old Testament passages. Well, there are other things even in the New... Oh, no, that one that you said was 1 Corinthians.
2 of them were
Okay,
1 Corinthians.
so 1 Corinthians, so that's the New Testament. All right,
Yes.
I retreat from that. However, I would also say this. There are other passages even about, like, farming practices and wearing certain clothes. You can't wear...
I still have more.
Oh, perfect.
So then she has this list of things that she's going to do, and some of them, I won't read all of them, but some of them, thou shalt submit to thy husband's will in all things. She gets that from Genesis 3, Peter.
That's how we run our
Peter,
house, don't we?
Ephesians, 1 Corinthians, Colossians. Thou shalt devote thyself to duties of the home, and then it's Proverbs, Titus, Timothy. Thou shalt mother. Psalms, 1 Timothy, Genesis. I'm going to stop listing because it's just all over the Bible, but nurture a gentle and quiet spirit. Dress modestly. Cover your head in prayer. Cannot cut your hair. Do not gossip. Cannot teach in church. Cannot have authority over a man, right? All these things. And then the rest of the book goes on where she's following all these things. She went through the whole Bible and was like, what do they say about women and what they should do in the Bible? She made a list and she talks about what it was like for her. And newsflash, it's not really possible. It's kind of contradicting because, again, these women in the Bible are coming from different cultures and different...
right. This is some of these things
they're more cultural
not supported.
than biblical.
They are more cultural practices.
Right. It's
than
what they were
are,
doing in Egypt at the time. It's
right.
what they were doing in
Mesopotamia,
Persia at the time. It's what
Babylon.
It's what they were doing in Israel at the time, right?
Right.
It's just crazy. So anyway, biblical. I hate that. Gives me the ick. I hate the word biblical. What's our last phrase?
Wow.
For part 1.
That was definitive. The next phrase I also loathe, and it is be in the world, but not of the world. Now, this one has a little bit of a mixed a mixed background, I'll say. Okay, and the reason for that is be in the world but not of the world is not directly found in the Bible. You can't find it anywhere. You can't find that phrase, okay? But there is an interesting passage from John's Gospel, from St. John's Gospel, chapter 17, verses 14 through 16, and I'm going to read it for you. It's short. And this is where this be in the world but not of the world gets construed. Once again, there is no direct link of this phrase to any biblical passage.
Have you heard this a lot? I've only ever heard it once before.
No, I've heard it many times, including people from my family. So, this is a passage from John's Gospel, again, chapter 17, verses 14 through 16. I'm going to read it for you. Mm-hmm. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, for they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Now, let me reread this phrase. This is Jesus talking. This is a prayer in John's Gospel. My prayer, Jesus saying, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but you protect them from the evil one. Now, emphasis on that. People will say, well, you know, we're supposed to be in the world, but we're not supposed to be of the world. Okay, I get that. I don't like the phrase because it has been misconstrued to, once again, put people who are doing things on the margins that people think that are bad or good. They're saying, these are things of the world. That music is worldly. We're not going to, this is an evangelical, go.
Can I say something quick?
Yes.
It makes me think of, no, keep going.
Okay. So anything that is secular is off limits.
No, I'm going to say it. It makes me think of Revelation.
Okay.
It makes me think of Revelation because what people do with Revelation is they think this is a literal telling of the future. Here's the checklist of things that need to happen before Jesus comes, and then they become passive whenever there is conflict in the Middle East. And they think, oh, this is required, therefore I'm not going to do any kind of humanitarian work because this is God's plan. And when people say, be in the world, not of the world, it feels like a cop-out to me.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
Oh, you don't want to be part of messy humanity?
Yes.
Newsflash, God indwelled in Jesus to be part of messy humanity, and
Correct.
we're called to do the same.
And just so...
Do you see the connection?
If we have... I'm being kind here, but for our listening audience, if people have told you scary things about the book of Revelation, please don't believe them. And here's the thing. Read the book of Revelation in community with a pastor and go be a part of a worshiping community. That's my first thing. But if you...
And read The Revelation for Normal People by Robin Whitaker, I think is her name.
Yeah,
it is the best book on Revelation I've ever read.
Revelation does not have to be a scary text. It could actually be a very liberating text.
And empowering.
And empowering and actually hopeful. And in Revelation, it talks about not us escaping and going somewhere else because of the rapture and all kinds of garbage like that. That's not what it's talking about. Actually, there's multiple passages of talking about God comes to dwell in the new heaven and the new earth with mortals, with people like you and me. God comes down and makes God's home with humanity. And so it's about a coming together of heaven and earth on earth. We could talk about what...
I didn't mean to bring up Revelation.
No, that's all right. But we could talk about what new earth, new heaven make, but we're not going to do that right now.
But in the world, not of the world, just is like a passive removal. Like,
well, right. And so...
I don't have to do anything.
Right.
Not of this world.
Right. And in this text from John's Gospel in chapter 17, Jesus is talking about a world. When he is talking about the world, he is not talking necessarily about the globe. He is talking about the Roman Empire.
Yes.
The world is the empire. He is talking about who is an evil one. who is a type of devil, who is a type of Satan, who is a type of
Revelation is who Revelation keeps talking about is the
yes,
Roman Empire.
and
is the enemy.
he's saying, protect yourself from the world, or protect yourself from the evil one, which is the empire, who is oppressing people, not giving people homes, imprisoning people, all these things.
You know how I get with the Roman Empire. It makes sense. Don't be in the empire because you can't help it. They conquered
of course.
You. You don't have to be of it though.
Right.
You don't have to participate,
Right.
and you don't have to benefit from
Right.
it. You don't have to work for them.
That is very different. So someone would not see this as the same, but I'm saying that this is very different. Somebody that wants to listen to the Beatles, that's not the same thing. That is not the same thing as protecting yourself from the evil empire.
Or reading Harry Potter.
Or watching The Hobbit, or watching The Lord of the Rings. That is something totally different in my mind. That's a personal opinion. But what Jesus is saying in this, again, this phrase, be in the world but not of the world, is I repeat, not a direct biblical narrative or a direct biblical quote. It is pulled out and it's merged around. And also in John's Gospel in chapter 17, that's also not what Jesus is saying.
Yeah.
It has kind of sounds similar, but it's actually not. And he's saying, basically, be a part of the world, change the world. Jesus' whole teachings are about changing the world to which you are, and not let the evil one or the empire.
I love this because we have recently been watching Star Wars, and our 4-year-old is in love with.
I love.
Luke Skywalker.
She's watching the first Star Wars. From 1977, and I think she might be slightly in love with Luke Skywalker.
She wants to marry him.
She wants to marry Luke Skywalker, but Luke Skywalker.
And she's drawing Luke Skywalker in a notebook.
Yeah, but Luke Skywalker from 1977.
Is that Mark Hamill?
Mark Hamill, I believe it is. But anyways, she is watching these old things, and then Empire Strikes Back is the second one. I forget what the first one's called. But anyways.
But both of our girls, go ahead.
They love it. And so I do these voices that, and they love this. So I always say Luke Skywalker's driving, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is dead, is speaking this voice, and he says, Luke Skywalker's driving, and let go, Luke. Let go, Luke. And so now
our girls walk around the house. Let go, Luke.
Let go, Luke. And
use the Force, Luke.
And Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader are fighting. I love it because it's the blue lightsaber and the red lightsaber, and they're fighting. And Darth Vader says, speaking about an evil one, or speaking about some type of evil empire, Darth Vader says, I am the master. And Obi-Wan Kenobi says to him, and Obi-Wan Kenobi's old, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I love this is very powerful to me, I actually get emotional thinking about it, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I'm actually thinking about this passage right now, Obi-Wan Kenobi says to the evil Darth Vader, who's both simultaneously saint and sinner, he has a good part of him, let me say that, redeemed in the end, but Darth Vader says, I am the master. And Obi-Wan Kenobi looks right at him and has his lightsaber, and he says, you're only a master of evil, Darth.
So good.
You're only a master of evil. And that to me is basically saying, yeah, you're not going to win.
And
you might think
here.
that you have this beautiful, wonderful starships and this empire and whatever, but I'm here and a part of a new way of thinking that is I'm just reading Star Wars right into John's Gospel, but we're talking
about empire. It makes me think of Star Wars. Everything.
But
But another part with this, in the world but not of the world, for me,
right.
I remember whenever I first started getting into Christianity, 2018-ish, 8 years.
Yeah.
And in some ways even before that, but like really committed, there was this phrase, Rob Bell actually said it, and Rob Bell's my number one author, theologian, all the things. He said, we are we are not spirits having a human experience. We're humans. I'm getting it all messed up. No, I said it backwards. We are spirits having a human experience.
Yeah.
And I like that, but I think that's related to like in this world but not of this world. Like, of course, yes, it is true that there's an eternal part of us. Soul, spirit, they're different, and we can separate those on another episode, but there's an eternal part of us, right? That's what a spiritual life is connecting to that eternal part that's in all of us.
Right.
And yet, if you connect too much with that part, this is hard to talk about because I'm going to talk in absolutes, but it's one of those paradox things again. The word is disembodiment.
Sure.
Yeah. There's something about in this world but not of this world, and the person who I've actually heard a couple people now that I think about use this, but the person I'm thinking of who has said this teaches her young children this.
Oh.
And I think about those children like, oh, you're going to grow up not feeling at home here in this body.
Right.
And I understand that there's a time to, like, we all feel not at home in this body sometimes. We all feel like there's a part of me that's bigger than this flesh cage, right? Of course. And yet, there's something to embodiment of, like, you're a person in this body. This body is you. Maybe just temporarily, but if you focus too much on how there's something else, you're not of this world, you're fully something else.
Well, it reminds me of being severed.
Yeah, we're watching the show Severed right now.
So,
but it's kind of full circle. It brings us back to how we were talking about sinner and saint, Jesus as human and divine fully. It's the same thing of like, yeah, we are spiritual and we're also very fleshy, muscly bodies.
Right, and this is interesting also, going back to like Protestant ethics or Protestant theology or Protestant principles is interesting because Martin Luther and John Calvin, for that matter, part of the Reformed tradition of Protestantism, Martin Luther and John Calvin in the works and confessions of Luther and in the institutes of John Calvin, they write that living faithfully in the world through one's vocation, whether that's a teacher or a pastor or a lawyer or a butcher or a police officer or a firefighter or a nurse or a doctor or a person who's working in the home, whatever your vocation is, you are in the world working and sharing the gospel, the good news. You don't have to have any like special, part. And one of the issues was that in medieval Europe, you had this emphasis on the monastic cloistered life. So you would go in, you would become a monk or a nun, and you would remove yourself from the outer world. You would go in prayer and in chastity and in love, and you would remove yourself from the world. And basically, many of the reformers were saying, that's not necessarily bad. Well, some actually were saying that is bad. But what they were saying is it's not necessarily bad, but that's not the core teaching of Jesus. Jesus is saying you should be in the world, you should be reforming the world. It doesn't matter what role you play or what your vocation is, but you're supposed to be in the world, sharing the gospel, and also working to make the world a better place. And at the same time, like we just talked about in John's gospel, resisting the evil one, resisting empire, resisting oppression. And here's the other thing that's rather interesting about that as well is, I've got to look for it here on my notes.
This is another one though, this phrase. I can see a situation. I wouldn't say never say this one. It's so, like, love the sin or hate the sin. I think it should be nixed from every vocabulary. I think it does so much harm.
Yeah.
But be in the world, but not of the world, especially with context of like empire, where it's like, I can see how sometimes you do have to separate yourself from certain
Yes, but once
things.
again, just like love the sin or hate the sin, it is emphasized with certain things, like not having your children listen to Led Zeppelin.
It's like a hyper control.
Or not having, not going to watch a certain movie or read a certain book. Or that's what it's become.
And not in an age appropriate way, but just
it's become very like legalistic. and you're separating yourself and you're removing yourself.
Well, it's speaking of Darth Vader being the master of only evil. It's you trying to be the master.
Right,
It's you
exactly.
Like, I know in parenting that always gets really messy for people, but it's you trying to control something.
And there's whole community. So
beyond.
I don't. This is not an anti-statement. Let me make that clear. I'm looking into the camera here. This is not an anti-statement, but there are whole communities that have devoted their life to this very non-directly biblical phrase. It's not in the Bible, but be in the world, but not of the world. I mean, you have whole communities like that, such
And
as.
it seems to me like it will be people who call themselves Bible-believing Christians.
Yeah, but I mean, even like the Amish.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The Amish are very much people.
Don't be of the world. Yeah.
Don't be be in the world, but not of the world. That very much that is a central part of their theology. They're cloistered. That they're on their own. They're not the only ones. They're just one of the most prevalent ones, especially here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's good.
So
it is. I really want to double down on the disembodiment, though. I do think whenever you hand children this phrase and really push it, it can create disembodiment, and that is something that Dillon and I have experience with. We understand disembodiment, and how difficult it can be, if not like really being. You have to be intentional about it. No, I'm here now. I don't have to be somewhere else all the time. And I think that can cause damage.
Yeah,
like a lot of these. All right, love the sinner, hate the sin. Biblical. Just the word biblical.
Right.
As a descriptor. God helps those who help themselves and be in the world, not of the world. Do you have a least favorite? God helps those who help themselves is probably my least favorite. But love the sinner, hate the sin is up there too.
God helps those who help themselves. I hate the sinner one just like you, but I am...
That's more American dream than Christianity to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. You should not you, we, including me, we should not bring God into things and say that God's only going to do certain things if I.
God will blank if I blank. Not a good equation. Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be sharing the fruits of the Spirit that we have to change the world. That's something totally different. And you might think, yeah, that's not, but it is, and we could talk about that at a different time. But when there is a transactional relationship between God and humanity, like, for instance, God only helps those who helps themselves, you're in deep doo-doo.
Yeah. Well,
Deep doo-doo.
We have a part 2 coming.
Part 2.
Next episode will be Cringey Church Words and Phrases Part 2.
Lovely. Please stay curious.
Stay curious.